very warm welcome to all, especially to our friends from visiting us from out of Canada, from the UK, the US, Turkey, Brazil, Germany, and provinces throughout Canada. I mean, it's a really diverse series of panelists, and we're very excited to have everybody here, and very pleased to have all of you here, of course, our colleagues from elsewhere, and people from the Ryerson community, and so forth. So before we begin, I should introduce myself. My name is Carlo Fanelli. I'm a postdoc here and instructor here in the Department of Politics at Ryerson, co-editor of Alternate Routes with Bryan, my distinguished colleague over there. And before we begin, I just also want to thank a number of people without which this conference would have been possible. The first being Jean-Paul Boudreau, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Maurice Matzerol from the Center for Labor Management Relations, Pam Sugarman, Chair of the Department of Sociology, Sorpong Pio, Chair of the Department of Politics, and the Center for Social Justice here in Toronto. So we all know that this is a very especially challenging moment in the remaking of post-secondary education here in Canada, but abroad, of course, as well. For some 30 years, proponents of neoliberalism have been pushing a program of social services retrenchment and public sector austerity across various services provisioning departments. The recession of 2008, of course, gave renewed vigor to push a program of privatization, with the state actually increasingly leading in the assault against public services, and in other instances, really creating the conditions for market rule. Some of you may recall a 1999 report by Merrill Lynch, which suggested that there was some $3 trillion in global education, which really served as a source of untapped privatization. Increasingly since then, democratic control over resources, things like knowledge production, public space, has been monopolized by none other than the profit motive. As such, many public sector institutions, in particular educational institutions, have been streamlining their services and courses to those that address market considerations or business related. Conversely, those more critically inclined, and therefore less likely to buy into a purely market-driven agenda, are isolated or have their program spending slashed or axed altogether. Here in Canada, as a result of consecutive reductions to transfers and general underinvestments in education, like other public services, notably healthcare, the proportion of public spending supporting university operating revenue has declined from some 84% to about 57% over the last 30 years. Over the last 2 decades here in Ontario, full-time per-student funding remains more than 24% below the national average, some $10,000 per student compared with $22,000 in Saskatchewan and as much as $25,000 in Alberta, although austerity initiatives threaten these provinces as well. So what have been the consequences? Well, over the last 25 years here in Ontario, college tuition fees has outpaced inflation by some 378%. For university undergrads, fees have outpaced inflation by some 509%. And for graduate students, fees have outpaced inflation by a whopping 724%. Unfortunately, the erosion and dismantlement seems to be continuing apace. Moves to 3-year degrees, 3-term academic years, and massive open online courses, coupled with so-called differentiation initiatives, threatens to radically reduce education, like other social services, to economic imperatives. Just yesterday, many will recall 60,000 Quebec students marched against austerity. In Nova Scotia, students were told that a rebate that provided up to $15,000 for post-secondary education graduates has been eliminated. All this, of course, against the background of striking nurses in Nova Scotia. Unfortunately, as I'm sure we will explore today, examples like this abound in Canada as well as around the world. But there are also modest glimmers of action being taken to counter these initiatives, and we hope this conference, in retrospect, can be seen as making a small, very minor contribution to that struggle. So before I pass this over to Jim here, I just want to mention 2 quick things regarding to Alternate Routes, a journal of critical social research that's been published since 1977. Today's presentations will all be recorded and placed on the Alternate Routes website, so you can follow those up there as well. I'd also like to encourage everyone to please take a look at previous issues that have been published there. We have a number of strong contributions from scholars, activists, journalists, and so forth. And also to look forward for future call for papers towards the end of the spring. On a more somber point, I would like to extend my sincere gratefulness to my co-editor Bryan Evans, whose 3-year term with the journal following this issue will be up. Bryan, I've learned a great deal from you, often your keen insights, and it's been a real pleasure to work with you, so thank you very much, Bryan. Of course, this isn't the end of Bryan and I working together. We're currently working on a book on provincial and territorial austerity, extending some of these discussions to elsewhere. So Bryan, if you could all join me please in thanking Bryan for his So, I am very pleased to introduce James Turk here. As many of us know, James is the Executive Director of the Canadian Association of University Teachers. For many years, James taught Labour Studies and Canadian Studies at the University of Toronto, and then actually gave up tenure to work in the labour movement before continuing with COT. He's published a number of books and led a number of studies. Some of them most recently include Disciplining Dissent, The Curbing of Free Expression in Academia, The Corporate Campus, Commercialization and the, I can't read my own writing here, excuse me. The commercialization of colleges and universities, and just published today actually, Academic Freedom and Conflict, The Struggle for Speech Rights in the University, and this is published by James Lorimer. So please, I'm sure many of the discussions that we'll be discussing here today will be taken up in his talk and in the book as well. I'm very happy to note, I've just been informed actually, that after 16 years with COT, James Turk will be joining us here at Ryerson as a distinguished visiting professor in the School of Journalism. On that note, I'd like to introduce James and welcome him to Ryerson.